Alright, this is gonna be a video on the truth. Alright, so the truth is the truth is not like very hard to explain. The truth is there's only one truth and stuff. There's only one truth and stuff, that's it. You know what I mean? It's not very hard to explain. The truth. The truth, what is the truth? It's the ultimate reality, so to speak. It's something that's like that can be argued with, you know what I mean? And the truth is it's something that's the ultimate reality, basically. That's basically what it is and stuff. It's the ultimate reality and stuff. That's you can't argue with it. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. That's what the truth is. Something that you cannot argue with. Something that's objective, you know what I mean? That's what the truth is. Of course, there's plenty of other definitions on what constitutes the truth. But, for the most part, the truth is something that's there's only one truth, so to speak. Let's just say hypothetically that there was a cat, right? This cat can either be alive or dead. It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. There's only like one. The one truth for this cat would be that it's either alive or dead. It cannot be like that. The cat is alive and dead at the same time. Do you know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to talk about. There's one truth, right? If there this hypothetical cat, right? It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. This cat can either be alive or dead. One of those two options, and there's only one truth for. In this case, right, that the cat's either alive or it's dead. It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. You know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to get at, right? The truth, there's ultimately only the truth can get narrowed down to one thing. You know what I mean? If there's like a bunch of other explanations, there's just like a series of different explanations for like one type of scenario that actually happened in the past. You theoretically you could narrow down these different explanations and find which one is the most plausible one to match the historical event that we're talking about, right? Actually, I'm kind of mumbling with my words. The truth, it can always be kind of reduced to one thing. That's kind of ultimately what I'm trying to say. There's only one truth for any type of thing that you might be having in mind. Let's just say that there's God. There's either a God or there is no God, right? There's only one type of truth in this regard, right? That a God exists or he does not exist. There cannot be two truths relating to something that's very important and that's very linear in terms of like whether or not it's real or fake. You know what I mean? Like there's either a God or there is no God. The cat is either alive or it's dead. There's only one truth. You know what I mean? This is I'm kind of making things convoluted, but let me kind of make everything more simple again, right? Again, the cat analogy is perfect. You have a cat, this hypothetical cat. This hypothetical cat cannot be alive and dead at the same time. It can only be either alive or dead. It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. It cannot be alive and dead at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say and stuff. This hypothetical cat, it can either only be alive or it can either only be dead. It cannot be in some sort of limbo state in between these two circumstances, right? It can either only be alive or it can only be dead. That's so important for you to understand. Likewise, in a lot of different complex topics that relate to this world, right? Whether or not a God exists. There's only one truth, that God either exists or he doesn't exist. Whether or not a specific person died, there's only one truth, that person, he or she either died or he didn't die. One truth. There's the truth. You can kind of narrow and kind of make the truth a lot more simplified. You can kind of break down to one thing ultimately. Truth. The truth can be kind of broken down into one thing and stuff. And that's very important. That the truth, it can be broken down and kind of put into one thing. It can be put into one thing. You're right. The truth can kind of be broken down and put into one thing. And stuff. That's so important. but you realize and understand this, that the truth can be broken down into kind of ultimately one sort of, there is only one reality that's true, right? Again, there's a cat, this hypothetical cat is either alive or dead. There's no, cannot be in like a limbo state. That's kind of ridiculous, you know what I mean? This hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead. There's no, you cannot be in a limbo state. That's kind of ridiculous, you know what I mean? And this is relating to all manner of complex topics. There's either a God or there is no God. There was one reality, aliens are either real or they're not real. There's ultimately only one truth. Of course there's some complexity and whatever, and there's some complexity, but you can kind of break that complexity down into one type of thing, right? I mean, obviously it depends on the topic as well. I mean, if we're discussing like things like this hypothetical cat, if the topic is whether or not this hypothetical cat is alive or dead, obviously that's a very thing that can be broken down in a very simplistic way. Of course, God, this is very important as well because it relates to religion. There's either God either exists or he does not exist. There's only one truth in this regard, right? That he's either real and he's out there up in the world, or he's just a figment of our imagination. You know what I mean? One truth, one reality. There's ultimately everything can kind of be broken down to one thing, and that one thing can kind of be obviously understood better, I guess, in this more simple way. Look at human history, right? Of course, there's a lot of different history. The way we view history is it's a little bit too naive. We view history in a very naive way. We're trusting all of the information we have on history, even though it's very possible that a lot of our information on a variety of different historical events could be kind of fabricated, made up, not reliable at all. We're being very naive to assume that all of the information we have regarding a lot of human history is even true in the first place. Of course, but human history, all of the events that happened in our past, those events, there's not different types. You cannot have a series of different timelines for those events. There's only ultimately our history happened in a very specific way, to the point where we're developed as we are right now. The human history there's only you cannot make it convoluted. You cannot say that there's things happen in a variety of different ways. There's different timelines for our different historical events, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? There's ultimately only one true historical timeline that leads to the modern day. But the information we have on this on our history, obviously we're very naive to assume it's trustworthy, blah blah blah. But you know what I'm trying to get at? I'm trying to bring it back to the truth, right? There was human history. There was only one reliable, there was one true historical timeline that happened, right? The events in our history, they happen in a very kind of one particular way. There was not a different, you cannot have different explanations. Of course you could. Maybe I'm being kind of dumb now, but you cannot have two different historical timelines for human history. You know what I mean? A timeline. Imagine someone making a historical timeline where the Nazis won it, right? Obviously, that'll be just kind of diluted because in our historical timeline, they obviously lost and we're the victors. I mean, not we're. I mean, the Axis and the Axis powers and stuff like that, the Anglosphere and stuff. They're the victors. But you cannot have two different timelines here in this regard. This is what I mean. The truth can only be broken down to one thing. There's only one valid historical timeline in regards to our history, right? The Nazis kind of obviously lost, but imagine someone trying to create a historical timeline where the Nazis, they are the victors. That would be delusional, obviously, because that timeline would be completely invalid. It would be completely wrong according to a lot of our reliable data and information. And you see what I'm trying to get at? There's only one truth. There can only be one truth. I'm using history as an example. You cannot have a bunch of different historical timelines, and the events in these different historical timelines, they don't match our most up-to-date knowledge and data and historical records and stuff like that. You cannot have multiple different historical timelines. In this historical timeline the Nazis won. In this historical timeline the Nazis lost. You cannot have this. This is completely ridiculous. Again, you know what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, there can only be one valid historical timeline. The truth, there's only one truth, so I'm really trying to nail and hammer down, right? There's some complexity, but that complexity can be broken down to one truth. Of course, religion's such a sensitive topic, but in terms of religion, right? Ultimately, there can only be one religion that's ultimately true, obviously. One religion that's ultimately true, because obviously you would say, well, no, they're all the same from different perspectives and all of this and stuff like that, especially regarding the Abrahamic faith, right? Christianity kind of ends at Jesus. Christianity doesn't include Muhammad. So, Islam, or that does not mean that Christianity invalidates Islam. You can see that it's really nonsense. Why are you kind of being hateful and trying to segregate people? All religions are the same. All religions are not the same. Ultimately, there can only be one true religion that's kind of valid. You know what I mean? Because Christianity ends at Jesus. So if that's the case, then Christianity kind of invalidates Islam. That means Islam is wrong and Christianity is right. There can have this kind of people. They kind of have this very hippie-like way of seeing the world. That all religions are valid and factual. And no. Ultimately, there can only be one religion that's valid. You know what I mean? Of course, a lot of you might have their own subjective opinions on this and might say that I'm just being delusional. But ultimately, one religion has to kind of be on top and be the ultimate truth, because the different world religions they make a bunch of different claims for the human being and for our afterlife and stuff like this, and for our history. So all of them cannot be true. It's a very dumb hippie way of seeing the world, right? That all religions are true, and all of them cannot be true by definition, because they invalidate each other in a lot of different regards and circumstances and stuff like this. And in regards to claiming a bunch of different things for the human being, a lot of religions they're at odds with each other. And again, I'm really trying to hammer this in, right? That the truth, there could only be like one type of truth, one type of ultimate reality that's true and stuff. With no, I guess, contradictions. Not contradictions, with no alternatives. The truth is only one thing. There's only one valid historical timeline. You cannot create a historical timeline where the Nazis won. That would be completely invalid and dumb. Obviously relating back to religion, right? Religion is a very sensitive, tricky subject to discuss. But obviously, there can only be one religion that's correct, because all of a lot of people say, they have this kumbaya approach, right? All religions can be true. That's kind of that's not true. Because the different world religions, they kind of invalidate each other in regards to a lot of different things. Again, I mentioned that Christianity ends at Jesus. Christianity doesn't include Muhammad. That's kind of tricky. And that's very tricky. That's not. So you can see how Christianity kind of invalidates Islam. It doesn't allow Islam to kind of be valid in its own way. It invalidates Islam. All religions cannot be true. That's kind of nonsense. That's a very hippie kumbaya way of seeing the world. It's nonsense. There's ultimately one religion that can only be true. And this video is about the truth. There's ultimately one truth that's just the truth. There might be a bunch of different alternatives, but only one of these kind of different alternatives has to be correct. I'll make it simple again, right? A cat, this hypothetical cat, is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have two cases, two explanations, right? The cat is either alive or it's dead. There's only one truth in this regard, right? That the cat's either alive or it's dead. The truth is I guess it's very singular. There's only one truth. Again, that's what I'm trying to get at here. You cannot have a series, a multitude of different truths. There's ultimately only one truth that's valid. And this relates to so many different complex topics, right? Which religion, obviously there's a bunch of different world religions, but we both know, right, that only one world religion has to be somewhat true. I mentioned that Christianity ends at Jesus. It doesn't include Muhammad. Christianity. So in that regard, Christianity invalidates Islam, because Islam kind of is based around Muhammad's life. But of course, Christianity rejects Muhammad in this regard. So it's they're at odds with each other. You know what I mean? There's one truth, one reality that's true. There has to be only one world religion that's correct. This, the truth is singular. This relates to so many different complex topics that are so hard to discuss right now, and so hard for me to articulate. There's only ultimately one truth that's valid. One truth. There's ultimately only one truth that's valid. There cannot be. You cannot have a variety of different truths, right? Again, to make it very, very, very simple again, right? This hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. The cat cannot be alive and dead at the same time. literally, that is a paradox. You know, let's assume that you have this hypothetical cat, right? This hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. There's no like, you cannot like have it in between. You know what I mean? There's no like two. You can have two. There's no like two explanations for this cat. This cat is either alive or it's dead in this regard, right? In this regard, you know, the truth is obviously very linear and singular, and I believe this type of logic applies to all manner of human affairs and complex topics. You know what I mean? The truth, there can only be one singular ultimate truth in reality. Of course, relating back to religion, there's a bunch of different world religions, obviously, and they're all at odds with each other. People don't want to admit this, but the different world religions, they are kind of competing with each other. You know, obviously they are. They're making the bunch of the different world religions, they all have their own claims about the world. They're all competing with each other, but these different world religions, like which, you know, only one of them can be true. Of course, there's also the possibility that atheism is correct and all of these world religions are just nonsense. But you know, in this regard, you know, there's only one truth. Right? Out of all of these world religions, either one of them is valid or all of them are nonsense. But even, you know, I mean, maybe I'm kind of making it sound like there's a bunch of different options and explanations, blah, blah, blah. I'm making everything convoluted again. See, I like to use that type of a cat analogy, this hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead. It's very easy to explain this, right? You cannot have two, like, truths in this regard. The cat is either alive or it's dead, and that's it. You cannot have two truths in this regard. The truth is simple, it's singular, it's one thing, the truth, you know. I'm out here, man. It's you can see it's a little bit it's getting a little bit almost looks like it's about to be sunset. I don't know, but anyway, the truth is singular. It's one thing. You cannot have a variety of different truths. To keep it very simple, you know, this hypothetical cat. I'm stressing this a lot, but you know, this hypothetical cat can either be alive. This hypothetical cat can either be alive or it can be dead. It cannot be. You cannot have two options. You cannot have two explanations for this cat's existence, or for this cat's circumstances, or whatever you want to call it, or for this cat's I don't know, state of being. I don't know. It can either be alive or it can be dead. You cannot offer two sort of explanations at the same time. That's ridiculous. Likewise, in regards to a lot of different complex topics. You know, in regards to a lot of different complex topics, ultimately there has to be one singular truth. You know, whether or not God exists, that's a very, 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 very complex topic. But it's either the case that a creator God exists, or he does not exist. You cannot have two different scenarios where God exists and he doesn't exist, or obviously in terms of world religions, there has to be one religion that's ultimately true. You know what I mean? A lot of you might disagree and say, a lot of you might have this hippie kumbaya approach, and you might think that all of the world religions, they're all just reflections of each other and stuff like this, and that's ridiculous, because you know, Christianity ends at Jesus. You know, it doesn't include Muhammad, and it doesn't allow Islam to be valid. You know what I mean? The different world religions, they're at odds with each other. You cannot disagree with me in this regard. You might be stupid, and you might try and have you might not really want to kind of think about this too hard and try to do the different world religions the claims that these different world religions make, they're all at odds with each other. You know what I mean? They make different claims. They kind of revolve around different people. That you cannot assume that all of the world religions are just reflections of each other. They're the same, and they're just from different perspectives. This is a very stupid type of mentality to have. The different world religions are at odds with each other and stuff, and only one of them can be valid. You know, the truth, again, there's only one truth. The truth is singular, one truth. You cannot have a variety of different truths. The truth has to be, ultimately, there's only one singular truth. Again, I'll make it very simple. The cat, I love using this type of cat analogy. You know, this hypothetical cat is either dead or alive. You cannot have it that this cat is alive and dead at the same time. That is ridiculous. That is a paradox. The truth in regards to this cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have both. You cannot have it both ways. There's ultimately one valid world religion, in my opinion. There has to be either one valid world religion, or obviously, if you're an atheist, you might assume and say that all of the world religions are nonsense. The only truth is atheism. Atheism. Obviously, atheism is kind of a lot of atheists get very a lot of atheists get very upset when you kind of imply that atheism sort of is like a religion. Obviously, it's kind of a contrary. It's kind of an oxymoron, obviously, because atheism. A lot of atheists get very upset. If you imply that atheism is a religion. Well, why is it, man? Why is it? I'm talking to someone, man. Atheism. Atheism. Atheism and stuff. Atheism, it's a very, there was this kid and stuff, he's kind of interrupted me, I don't know, I kind of lost track of what I was saying. Atheism, right? A lot of atheists would get very upset if you imply it's a religion, obviously. But it's probably that kid interrupted me, so I kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, anyway, there has to only be one valid world religion. Or obviously, if you're an atheist, all of these world religions have to be, like, they're all just nonsense. Ultimately, there can only be one truth. Yeah. Here, man, outside here. Getting interrupted a lot, man. It's so difficult to record outside, I'm telling you, man. Obviously, I like doing it because this is more interesting, but it's very hard to record outside here. I just do it because the cinematography is a lot more interesting. Anyway, there can only be one valid truth, one thing that's true, and this even if this relates to so many different complex topics. Again, whether or not God exists, ultimately, there can only be one case where God, the reality is that God either exists or he doesn't exist. You might disagree and have your own opinions, but that is the only kind of truth. God exists or he doesn't exist. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have like this type of paradox where God exists or he doesn't exist, or in the case of this hypothetical cat, the cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. On the truth, there's only one truth. Let's say there's this you have this bottle of poison. Basically, this bottle of poison, whatever, and there can only be one truth. Like, that bottle of poison is either going to kill you or it isn't going to kill you. Like, let's say you drink this bottle of poison and it completely deteriorates your internal organs and you die. That poison killed you. There's no like two ways where, it wasn't the poison didn't kill you, it was something else. Of course, making this a lot more convoluted than it needs to be. The poison, it either kills you or it doesn't kill you. You know what I mean? There's only one reality and stuff. One truth, you know what I mean? There cannot be, like, you cannot have different alternatives. There's only one truth, and I'm using these examples that are very convoluted, but like the hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. There's only one truth, one ultimate reality. And obviously, in terms of, this relates to so many different complex topics that I don't have a lot of time to discuss. Whether or not God exists. Obviously, there's a lot of debate and speculation. Obviously, that's very hard for me to sum up in this video that I'm doing and recording. But God either exists or he does not exist. There is no two ways about this. There's only one reality that's true, that God exists or he doesn't exist. There's no two ways. You cannot have two scenarios really in this regard, right? And also in a lot of different regards to a lot of different things. There was one ultimate reality and one truth. That's so important to kind of think about. The truth is singular. The truth can only be by itself. You cannot attach anything else to the truth. The truth is one thing, it's singular. It'll blow your mind once you start to think about it. Human history, you have let's just say there's obviously we have there's a historical timeline and stuff, blah blah blah. Imagine someone created another historical timeline and said, the Nazis actually won the war. That would be nonsense, obviously. Do you get what I'm trying to say? There's one truth. There can only be one valid historical timeline. You cannot have two different historical timelines, one where the Nazis won the war and blah 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 and stuff like this. That would be just nonsense, obviously. There's one valid historical timeline. Obviously, this relates to so many different complex topics. There's ultimately only one type of truth in regards to so many different complex topics. I mean, this really does relate to so many different complex topics, whether or not God exists. Obviously, God either exists or he does not exist. There's only one truth in this regard. You cannot have it both ways, man. Obviously, world religions, there's only one valid world religion. Obviously, there has to be only one valid world religion. Obviously, if you're an atheist, you might say that all of these world religions are just nonsense. Atheism is sort of the truth, and all these religions are just, they're basically just mythology. They're nonsense. You know what I mean? Obviously, atheism, in this regard, atheism, you cannot be an atheist and a theologian. I mean, obviously a theologian, maybe you can study religion, but you cannot be a genuine believer in God and an atheist at the same time. Obviously, that's a paradox, that's an oxymoron. You gotta research about these words: paradox, oxymoron. You know what an oxymoron is? You got these two different scenarios, or these two different two different things, and they contradict each other. They don't go well together. You know what I mean? Apples and oranges. You cannot label an orange an apple. That's an oxymoron. You know what I mean? And let's say you have a literal apple that you eat and stuff. A literal apple that you can, suck on or whatever. You cannot say, oh no, this is actually an orange, and then you have like an orange, and you can say that's an apple. That would be an oxymoron by definition and stuff like that. You there, man? There you are, man. There you are, man. You going for your run, man? Yo, my brother there and stuff. He's walking. He's gonna do his running thing. Anyway, yeah, you got an apple and you got an orange. You learn about what an oxymoron is. That's so important. Go on Google. Type in the definition of an oxymoron. You cannot have it both ways. There's one ultimate truth. You know what I mean? I'm kind of stressing this a lot, but the truth. There's only one truth. Again, this hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. It's just nonsense, man. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. This hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead and stuff. You cannot have it both ways. That's just kind of nonsense and ridiculous. Oh, it's freezing. I'm freezing out here, man. It's so hard to record outside because I keep getting interrupted by so many different people. But I like doing it outside. It's more interesting. But anyway, this hypothetical truth, right? I mean, not hypothetical truth. I'm being stupid. I'm mumbling my words because I'm outside and it's kind of cold here. But there's ultimately, this hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways, man. You cannot have it both ways in regards to so many different complex topics. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is singular. The truth is lonely and it's on its own and stuff like that. The truth is on its own. It's so important to understand. You cannot have it both ways and stuff. It's very important to understand and stuff. The truth and stuff is, like I said, the truth is, this is you can kind of like turn this into a quote and say it's by me, right? But the truth is lonely. The truth is on its own. It's only one thing. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is lonely and stuff. That's so true. You know what I mean? You cannot have it both. You cannot have things both ways. The truth is lonely. That's like a quote that you can get from me. Is that you, dum dum? Yo, I'm here, man. Is that you? Leave the rucksack. Yo, is that you? Dum dum. Yo, is that you, man? Don't be out here. Go back in, man. Yo. Don't be out here, man. Go in, man. I'm gonna come back in a couple minutes, man. Yeah, the truth. You can turn this into a quote, and you can say it's from me. The truth is lonely. The truth is on its own. There's only one truth. You cannot have multiple different things that are true. You know what I mean? Different scenarios, different different states of being. I don't know. You know what I mean? The truth is lonely. That's something you can take from me, right? Turn that into a quote. The truth is lonely because there's only one truth. There can only be one particular thing that's true in regards to so many different complex topics. And obviously I'm kind of mumbling with my words because this is so hard to kind of explain in a very thorough, easy to understand way. Easy to understand. Maybe I'm just being dumb again, but the truth is lonely. There's only one truth. The truth's on its own. You cannot have different things attached to this truth. God either exists or he doesn't exist. You cannot have it both ways. Stupid. There's only one truth. That's obvious. That's one truth. That's I guess it's kind of hard to term it exactly. There's the truth is lonely. There can only be one truth. Yeah, the truth is lonely. Just turn that into a quote. Say it's by me. Say it's by me. Turn that into a quote. The truth is lonely. That because it's true. The truth is lonely. There's only one truth. You cannot have things both ways or in a multitude of different ways or other ways or whatever type of way you want. There's only one type of truth and stuff, and there's no debating this. Let's say, this hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have that. The cat cannot be alive and dead at the same time. There's only, the truth in this regard is that the cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. The truth, there's one truth, one truth, in terms of like human history, like there's a bunch of different historical timelines. Imagine someone, again, I use this, and this is a very easy to understand example, right? That someone makes a timeline where the Nazis won the war. That's obviously, that'll be nonsense, that's so stupid. Because that historical timeline doesn't match the timeline that we're all accustomed to, the timeline that's been kind of more validated, right? Obviously, because you see, you have these two different historical timelines. Someone made a historical timeline where the Nazis won the war. That'll be nonsense. Do you see what I'm trying to say? The truth, there can only be one truth, and this relates to so many different complex topics. And I can't really kind of, I keep trying to, I can't really kind of say too much on this because I don't want to make things too convoluted and complex and hard to understand. I don't want to make things too complex and hard to understand. But the truth, there's only one truth, right? Again, this hypothetical cat, the cat's either alive or dead. In terms of human history, there's only one valid historical timeline. You cannot make a historical timeline where the Nazis won the war. That'll be nonsense. You know what I mean? There's one valid truth. The truth is lonely. You can kind of turn that into a quote and say it's by me. The truth is lonely. You cannot have things both ways. There's only one truth. Again, you have a hypothetical cat. The cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is lonely. There's only one truth, and this relates to so many different complex topics. You have all of these different world religions, blah 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 blah. Ultimately, they're called these different world religions. Only one of them can be true. And a lot of you, again, might have this hippie kumbaya approach and say that, oh no, all of these different world religions are all reflections of each other. This is just clearly nonsense, because these different world religions, they make a bunch of different claims about the world, and these claims are at odds with each other, and so blah blah blah. The different world religions, only one of them can be true. This relates to so many different complex topics. Man, oh shoot, man, it's getting cold. I gotta get back in soon. But so many different complex. There's so many different complex topics. Blah blah blah. But the truth can only be there can only be one truth. Right? You know what I mean? The truth is lonely. You cannot have it both ways. Typically and usually, you know what I mean? The truth is lonely. A lot of you might disagree, but the truth is lonely. There's only one truth. Only one world religion can be true. There can only be one valid, there can only be one valid scenario where the cat is either alive or dead. The cat cannot be. You cannot have two scenarios where the cat is alive and dead at the same time. That's so ridiculous. That is a paradox and oxymoron. Look into the definitions of what a paradox and an oxymoron is. I'll help you understand what I'm trying to say. God exists or he doesn't exist. You can't have it both ways. You cannot have things both or triple or quadruple or in a variety of different ways. There can only be one truth that's valid. You cannot have things in a variety and multitude of different ways. There's only one valid truth. The truth, again, is lonely. The truth is on its own. It doesn't have anything on it or by its side. The truth is completely lonely and stuff. That's so important to understand. The truth is lonely, very, very lonely, right? The truth is on its own. You cannot have a variety of different truths and stuff. That'll be almost literally like a paradox. You cannot have different historical timelines, one where the Nazis won and one where they didn't. There's only one valid historical timeline, right? The truth is, it relates to so many different complex topics, and I don't want to make this convoluted and hard to understand. That's why I'm using the very basic example of, you have this hypothetical cat. The cat is either alive or it's dead. You can't have it both ways. It's so important to understand. You cannot have things both ways. There's ultimately one truth. Either a God exists or he doesn't exist. There's one truth in this regard. You cannot have. There's no such thing as a variety of different truths. There's only one truth. The truth is lonely, and you have to kind of, the truth is lonely. That's something you have to understand. Aliens exist or they don't exist. There's no you cannot have it both ways. Aliens exist and they don't exist at the same time. Obviously, you can kind of argue about the definition of what an alien is and blah 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 blah. But aliens exist or they don't exist. There's only one truth in this regard. This hypothetical cat, this hypothetical cat's either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. Don't be stupid. A lot of you might be kind of. Might want to argue back at me and stuff and say, oh well, you can't have it both ways. No man, no, don't be stupid, man. You cannot have things both ways. There's ultimately one truth. All of the world, there's a variety of different world religions, but only one of them has to be true. Or if you're an atheist, all of them are just nonsense, and atheism is true, obviously. But in this regard, anyway. Ooh, I just want to show you some scenery and stuff. The truth is, I'm lonely. You cannot. It isn't. You cannot have like things both ways. The truth is very, very, very lonely. And the truth is lonely. It doesn't have anything on it by its side. Well, there's only one truth. You might disagree, but think about it in regards to all different manners of complex topics, in regards to a lot of different things. Human history. Imagine someone makes a historical timeline with the Nazis. That timeline would be nonsense. There can only be one valid historical timeline. Likewise, there can only be one, truth in regards to so many different complex things. I'm kind of really stressing this, but it's so important to understand that there's only one ultimate reality, right? There's only one truth that you have to kind of try and discover and stuff. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult and hard. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult for you to find this one ultimate reality and truth, but the truth is singular. It's lonely. The truth is lonely. Get pen and paper and dot that down. That's a very nice quote. The truth is lonely. Something made up by me. Yeah, because it's true. The truth is lonely. You cannot have different competing theories for one reality. Different theories and explanations for one specific event or scenario, or I don't know. This relates to so many different things. There's only one truth, only one world religion that's correct. God either exists or he doesn't exist. The hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have things both ways, or in a variety of a multitude of different ways. There's only one truth, one ultimate reality and stuff. So it will blow your mind once you start to think about this. There can only be one truth, one ultimate reality. You cannot have it both ways, man. I'm kind of stressing this a lot, but it's so important to understand this. One world religion, that's correct and true. God either exists or he doesn't exist. You cannot have it both ways. So important to understand this. God either exists or he doesn't exist. The hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. That's so important. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is lonely. The truth is on its own. That's so important. You cannot have things both ways. You cannot be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. You cannot. The truth is lonely. That's a quote by me. You can kind of print it on a shirt or something. I don't know. But it's true though. The truth is lonely. You have all of these different world religions. Ultimately, only one of them can be true because they're all claiming different things about the world and about the human being. All of them cannot be true at the same time. That's kind of that's a paradox. Because a lot of these different world religions invalidate each other in so many different regards. You know what I mean? There's one thing, I'm kind of stressing this, but the truth is lonely. There's only one truth, one ultimate reality. You cannot have a bunch of different realities and stuff like this and truths. That'll be completely paradoxical. That'll be like a paradox. Learn about what a paradox is. Learn about what an oxymoron is. There's only one truth. That's so important for you to kind of figure out and understand. You cannot have a variety of different truths. That's just a kind of stupid. This relates to so many different complex topics that I don't have a lot of time to discuss now. But the truth, there has to be only one type of truth. There has to be only one type of truth that's valid. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have a bunch of different truths. You cannot have it both ways, man. It's only one thing. The truth is lonely. So important for you to understand that the truth is lonely. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is lonely. That's so important to understand. Again, this hypothetical cat is either alive or it's dead. You cannot have it both ways. That the cat is in this hypothetical example, the cat's alive and dead at the same time. That'll be a paradox. You cannot have it both ways. The truth is lonely. The cat is either alive or the cat is dead, because this is the best way to understand what I'm trying to say, right? There's only one ultimate reality and truth, kind of to make it very simple. You have this hypothetical cat, right? This hypothetical cat is either alive or this hypothetical cat is dead. You can't have it both ways. There has to be only one world religion that's correct. God either exists or he doesn't exist. You cannot have it both ways. And the truth is lonely. Right? That's so important to understand. The truth is lonely. There's only one truth, one ultimate reality, and you have to try so hard to figure out what this ultimate reality and truth is. Right? It's very difficult as well because there's so many different things in the way. Right? That's kind of sort of blinding you to what the actual ultimate reality and truth is. But you gotta try very hard. That's all I'm saying. Right? The truth is lonely, right? The cat is either alive or it's dead. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. There's only one ultimate reality and truth, and you have to try very hard to figure out what that ultimate reality and truth is. We have to try very hard to figure out what that ultimate reality and truth actually is. And we have to make sure that we're not being kind of blinded by a false reality and lies and stuff like this. The truth is lonely. We have to try very, very, very hard to figure out what this ultimate reality and truth is. And we have to make sure that we're not kind of being misled by lies and delusions and falsehoods and stuff.